Now, there's an aspect of Torah that maybe wasn't so relevant for the last 2,000 years. Just like, maybe you can give me an example of things study that's part of Torah, that was accepted, known that it's part of Torah, the written law, the oral law, and yet was neglected, not studied by the masses throughout the ages and even in modern, even till this day. An aspect of Torah that is not learned. Not the Kabbalah, Halakha, in other words, the laws of the laws of the land, maybe the law of the Kohanim, but more specifically the laws of the Beit HaMikdash and the sacrifices, like the Kohanim. Also that pertains to the land. People, Trumot and Masrot. How many people in America learn about Trumot and Masrot? You give a tithe. But more specifically, even in Israel, where we do maybe more learn those laws, we have to know, we should know. But the laws of the temple and the sacrifices, a third of the oral law, right? There's 6 orders of the Mishnah, right? The last 2, Kodshim and Taharot, the laws of impurity, that apply at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. No one denies that that's part of the Torah. But what? It wasn't relevant. It wasn't a part of the day-to-day agenda that you needed to know these laws, otherwise you couldn't function. The laws of Kashrut, the laws of Shabbat, every week you had Shabbat, you had to know. You could be transgressing laws, doing wrong, and going off the track if you're not aware of the laws. Like the Chafetz Chaim says, if you don't learn the laws, you definitely will desecrate Shabbat. God forbid. So in other words, it wasn't necessary. For 2,000 years, we were in exile, the nation didn't exist, we didn't have the temple, and these laws became, as we'll see, these extra futuristic, the law of Gemara called it Hilchot de Mashiach, the laws of the Mashiach. In other words, they'll apply sometime in the future. Meanwhile, you could spend a few lifetimes just learning the laws of Shabbat, of keeping kosher, Yoredeh and Orach Chaim, whatever. The laws of the Kodshim. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't have these laws. The Shulchan Aruch, he explicitly writes that he's writing the laws that apply, pertain to the day-to-day existence in our world, in the exile. What that we have now when we're still in exile. The Rambam, however, writes the laws that apply to all the Torah, the whole gamut of Torah, from the Madaf, from Hilchot Yisrei Torah, the philosophical underpinnings of Judaism, down to the laws of kings and their wars, Hilchot Malachim u'Milchamotehem, the laws of Eretz Yisrael and the wars. The Beit HaMikdash obviously all includes everything, not just the laws. That he met this holistic body of Torah that encompasses all to give this the full holistic view. But the Shulchan Aruch is not so. So again, you could spend a few lifetimes just learning the Shulchan Aruch. And that's what took place. Again, except for those few, there were giants, definitely there were rabbis. For the erudite few, the special few that learned all of the Torah, they learned all of Talmud Bavli and Yerushalmi and Midrashim and Chazal and the Kabbalah, and they also learned definitely part of the Kodshim and Taharot, which is in the Talmud Yerushalmi mainly. The Bavli, which was redacted in outside the land, indeed doesn't have all those tractates because it was neglected, it wasn't learned. Again, not because anyone denied that that's part of Torah and we're going to come back to it and need it. The Chafetz Chaim wrote that we have to come back to learn the Kodshim and Taharot now. We're going to approach the time. We're approaching the time, he said, of the Messianic era, that we have to know these laws again. They're going to become relevant. But I'm just explaining how for 2,000 years they weren't relevant, and therefore were taken out of the... not taken out, don't learn this. But first you have to learn what you need to know on the basic level. Individual responsibilities, obligations of every day. And it became a luxury. So too the laws of the Mashiach. It's not because they're not important, they're not part of Torah. But how it will come, when it will come, what are the signs, how to expect it, how to leave that. That's all very good, it's all very important, but it's so far off, that's literally Hilchot de Mashiach. That's literally the laws of the Mashiach. So leave that for the Mashiach. When that time comes later, or who can ever, when you finish everything else, what we have to know for the day-to-day, then maybe we'll learn about that. So indeed it wasn't learned. And then the concepts, as we'll talk about what the concepts became, like you said, this wait for the Mashiach, passive, wait for the lightning bolt, or wait for the magic carpet to come to New York and pick us up, and then we'll come, definitely. We're not against. We believe, we're working for the Mashiach. But by being religious Jews here, wherever we are, maybe it requires more. And maybe now at this time we have to understand what is taking place and to work with it, to learn it, to appreciate it, to know how to guide it. Otherwise, you will not be aware and obviously not be able to guide it. The Vilna Gaon writes, his student writes in his name, the whole book on the teachings of the Vilna Gaon about the Mashiach, about the redemption project. Kol HaTorah, it's called. Hillel Mishlov. He says the whole book is the teachings of our master, the Vilna Gaon, on the process of redemption. And there he elaborates on the Mashiach ben Yosef, that we'll talk about, this aspect of the messianic process. And he says it's a mitzvah v'chovah, and a commandment and an obligation on everyone. And certainly in these generations, and certainly on the leaders of the generations, to know, to learn, to deal with all the 156 aspects of laws in general of the Mashiach, but the 156 aspects that he delineates in this chapter 2 in Kol HaTorah of the Mashiach ben Yosef. Without which you will not be able to understand and appreciate, because you might have ideas of expecting it some other way, and then when it's here, you're looking in the wrong direction, and then don't appreciate it, don't recognize it, and obviously, like you said, don't work with it, don't know how to work with it, because I'm waiting for the Mashiach. But it taps you on the back and says, here I am, hold my hand, let's go together, and don't bother me, I'm waiting for the Mashiach, because you're looking in a different direction. And we'll see how different the directions are, because our views of what we might have expected are not necessarily what the Torah, the sources tell us will be. And like I said, it's like this radiology that it takes training. It's not the simplest thing. If it was so obvious that when it comes, we'll all know, it'll be so clear, then maybe it's a nice study, but it may be extra luxurious. Because when it comes, we'll all know, and we'll know what to do, and we'll know how to work with it. But it's not so. It's so great, and it's so amazing. And the reason it comes so clandestinely and so maybe the unexpected way is part of this divine scheme of things that brings about the higher redemption, as we'll learn about why it comes this way. Why shouldn't it come through these supernatural, clear miracles that no one has any doubts, any questions, no need to study? Again, the magic carpet is clear. It says, I'm the real Mashiach, and everyone knows. But it's not necessarily that way. It could be that way. We'll see. That's what we'll see the sources. What you said. Maybe there's other sources that say differently. So now we have to see the source of what the Torah says. Again, and that's the first thing we'll jump into, the first sheets of again, we'll be giving out sheets, and you'll see the sources inside. And hopefully that's what our point is, to learn it, to understand it. So again, another reason for learning it is to know that if we're in the middle of these process, of these stages of redemption, the question now is not hoping or learning about what maybe will be another 500,000 years. Theoretical learning and study of what will be. Now we're talking about understanding reality, understanding of realizing, recognizing the hand of God in the present. It's here in front of you and you're not aware of it. In other words, are the Torah concepts on par with what is taking place? Because it's not a theory. Maybe 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, it was a theoretical study of how the Mashiach will be. Natural, miraculous, secular, religious, holy, all at once, perfect, rabbis, scholars, physical, spiritual. But now, when it's taking place, now it's a question of life and death. In other words, now it's of how do you deal with what is taking place in the present. Also, how you see the hand of God in the present. How do you recognize this? And how do you guide it? Like we say the Pasuk, when we read the reading of the Torah, we take out the Torah, Ayin ba'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem, to see the hand eye to eye. So Rav Tzvi, Rav Kook used to explain how to line up the human eye to the divine eye. In other words, to see eye to eye in the hand of God, to see what God is doing in the world. In other words, this is the theological ramifications of recognizing God, of emunah.